Welcome back to part 3 of our series. First two parts, we were able to set up our basic network structure, break up the first blocks of IP addresses, and assign them to the correct departments. So now what we want to do is focus on breaking up the rest of our IP addresses. So at this point, these were the 4 blocks of IP addresses that we were working with, and from 0 to 63 and from 64 to 127, and we gave those to the sales department and to the marketing department. So the only IP addresses we have left are these two here. So let's see if we could make another note of that somewhere else. Let's see, how does that work? Perfect. Okay, so here are our remaining blocks of IP addresses. They're all 64 IP addresses each. So what we want to do is see if we could get blocks of, like for example, this one's 25 IP addresses. So maybe if we could get a block of 32, then we could use that block as the IP addresses for this particular LAN, which is LAN 1. So let's see if we could do that. So remember our bit borrowing. If we want to borrow to 32, then we'll only need, instead of 2 to the 0, we need 2 to the 5, and then we'll have to borrow 3 bits. Does that make sense? So let's go through that over here. So if we borrow 3 bits, it'll be 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get our 8 bits total. The 2 to the 3, which will equal to 2 to the 3, which equals to 8 different segments of 32 bits. And the zeros will represent the number of PCs in each segment, so that would be 2 to the 5, and 2 to the 5 of course is 32 bits, and your subnet mask would be 255.255.255. So you can either take 32 and subtract that from 256, which we could do right now, which is 256 minus the 32 that we know is the number of usable IP addresses, minus 32, and that gives you 224. The other way you could do it is to add the value of each of these bits. So remember that number, 224. So the way you would do that is do 128, and then you're going to add the other value here, which is the 64 plus the third value over here, which is 32, and this should give us back our 224. So you see, the subnet mask could be calculated both ways. So this is 255.255.255.224 would be a subnet mask. And what that gives you is 8 different blocks of 32 IP addresses. But since we are going to start with this block of 32, it starts at 128. So we're using this block, the block that goes from 128 to 191. And let's break that block down. So if we break that into 32, then we would have, let's do it right here, 192.168.1.128, and that will go to all the way to 192.168.1.159, and that should be 32 IP addresses, yes. Then you'd have the second block, which is 192.168.1.160, and that one will go all the way to 192.168.1.191. and that will get your second block of IP addresses. The third block of IP addresses would be 192.168.1.192, and that one will go all the way to 192.168.1.223. 1.223, because you're adding 32 to the 31 to the 191, which equals to 223. And the last block of IP addresses would be 192.168.1.224, and that one will go all the way to 192.168.1.255. And those will be your 4 blocks of 32 IP addresses. So here we go. Gonna leave that little notation right there. So what we did, we broke up this block of IP addresses, which was a total of 64 IP addresses each. And these 64 IP addresses got broken down into these 4 blocks of IP addresses. Okay, so let's make a note of it that these are 32 blocks of IP addresses. Let's just do something like this so it's a little clearer when we go back and check it out in our notes. 32, and down here is 32, and down here is 32. Remember that these are exactly the same ranges. You see it goes from 128 to 255, from this 128 to this 225, but these two were only broken down as 64 IP addresses each, and 64, and from this one would be a block of 64 also. Okay, so we took these two 64 blocks of IP addresses and turned them into 4 blocks of 32 IP addresses each. And what we're going to try to do for this particular set of 32 is to use this first line, this first range of IP addresses for LAN 1. So let's do that right now. So LAN 1 is going to take the 192.168.1.128 to 192.168.1.159, and this is a complete block of 32 IP addresses, and we are going to use the subnet mask of 255.255.255.224, and that should be all the information we need for LAN 1. Awesome. So LAN 1 is going to get this block of IP addresses, and it covers a full 32, and we're only looking for 25. So we're in good shape with that one. So we could continue to move on. So this video is already up to about 9 minutes long. So I'm going to stop right here for this part 3 of this video. And in part 4, we're going to continue on to create the IP addresses we need for LAN 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, and we're going to keep going. All right, thank you, and I will see you in the next video.